Hey, what's up, everyone? James from Junkyard Fox. Thank you so much for joining me. And today we're going to be having a relaxing video talking about books. So, nothing too action-packed, but I do want to shed light on some of my favorite books. I happen to be an avid book reader, and there's a lot of books that I like to read and come back and reread and enjoy over and over again. And of course, a big genre that I like to read is survival stories. So we're going to be talking about some of my favorite fictional survival situations. I'm not talking about like a tutorial type of books like Morse Kahansky or Dave Canterbury, anything like that. Those I enjoy as well. But once again, today I just want to talk about fictional books, a fictional scenario, and what I've learned from them, stuff like that, a brief synopsis on the story, and so in case you've had, a New Year's resolution to read more, something like that, maybe this will lead you in the right direction. So without further ado, let's talk about some of my favorite survival story books. Thank you for joining me. Let's get started. So starting off with the first book, this one tends to be very popular. A lot of people that get into survival, they constantly bring up that this is a book they read during middle school, and this is what got them into survival. I myself was never shown this book, but I'm glad I found it years later. I'm talking about Hatchet by Gary Paulson. This book right here, as you can tell, it's not a very long read. It's not very complex. Once again, tailored more to, 6th, 7th grade, somewhere around there. And the basic synopsis is there's this 13-year-old boy named Brian, and his parents are getting divorced, so he's going to go from his mom's to his dad for the summer. His dad's in Canada now because his family's getting divorced, and he's just miserable about the whole divorce thing. So he's upset at his mom. His mom gives him a hatchet, so he can go out there with his dad and explore the woods and all that stuff. And this kid is just very moody. And he gets on a Cessna plane, a small plane, to fly up to where his dad's at in Canada. And the pilot gets a heart attack. And they crash. And the boy Brian survives. The pilot doesn't. And now he has to, the city kid has to learn how to find shelter and how to make fire and how to catch food and stuff like that. So it's not a very complicated book. You can easily complete this in one sitting if you really have the mind to do so. One of my favorite things in the world is eating wild food, and this has some really cool moments when this kid has been starving for days and he's injured, so he's not even at full capacity to like run and chase things or whatever. And he finally figures out how to catch fish, and he has a fire going, so he roasts the fish. And the way it's described, he has a beast. Once he figures out how to catch fish, it kind of becomes easier for him. And so just a quick excerpt is: it had been a feast that day, his first feast day, and a celebration of being alive, and the new way he had of getting food. By the end of the day, when it became dark, and he lay next to the fire with his stomach full of fish and the grease from the meat smeared around his mouth, he could feel new hope building in him. Not hope that he would be rescued, that was gone, but hope in his knowledge, hope in the fact that he could learn and survive and take care of himself. Tough hope, he thought that night. I am full of tough hope. Love that. One of my favorite parts of this book. Very cool read, very simple. Once again, a lot of people got into survival stories with this book. I found my copy for $2 at a thrift store. So, keep an eye out on thrift stores. You can find some great treasures. In fact, I think damn near every single book in this list, now that I think about it, I have gotten from a thrift store. So I didn't even have to pay a ton of money. So as I said earlier, a ton of people that eventually would get into camping and bushcraft and survival would have been exposed to that genre through this book when they were in school. As I said, I was never shown this book when I was growing up. However, I was shown this one. This is The K by Theodore Taylor. And I loved this book when I was in 6th grade, and I still love it to this day. I've read it many times. And this book is very similar to Hatchet, young adult novel, not very big of a book. So, once again, if you had a mind to, you can knock this out in a day or two. This one, I will say, gets a little bit more complex because you do have a survival situation, but there's more themes of racism and changes in differences in classes and stuff like that. Nothing too preachy, but I just think it's done expertly well done. Brief plot synopsis is this is taking place during World War II in the Caribbean. So the Germans are prowling around trying to knock out, oil refineries and stuff like that. And the little boy, a little white boy, his name is Philip. His dad works for the oil refineries. And so as the Germans are prowling, they're trying to evacuate, make their way back to the United States where they're going to be safe. And their ship gets sunk down. They get shot down by they get torpedoed by one of the German submarines, and now these two end up stranded together in an island. An old black man named Timothy, and Philip, a young, well-to-do white kid, and a cat named Stu, by the way. So it's three life forms, three strangers trying to live together. And there's also differences in classes, because Timothy, this old black man, he's been a dock worker, a shipyard worker his whole life. They've lived together in the same community, but they've never engaged with one another. They've never, it's two different lives, and now they're stranded together in this island in the Caribbean, and they have to learn to live with each other and learn to accept each other's viewpoints and differences in age, differences in survival and stuff like that. And I think it's really awesome. I think it's done very expertly well in how you have these two people that don't know each other, and they're panicking, and they may squabble, and they end up coming together as friends. And it's really touching. It's really awesome. And of course, it's in the Caribbean, so if you're looking for something a lot more, with jungle and beaches, this is a great book for you. Making a shelter out of palm fronds and cooking up lobsters and stuff like that. And there's just one twist to this whole story, is one of them is severely injured and has to learn to survive with this severe injury that most people would give up living. So, great book. Let me find out if I can have an excerpt here. I like to underline my favorite lines. So the opening line right here of chapter 1 is, like silent, hungry sharks that swim in the darkness of the sea, the German submarines arrived in the middle of the night. Damn, that's pretty cool. All right, let me see if I can find another one. Now, of course, them being surrounded by seawater, they need to conserve as much drinking water as possible. And so in this situation, it says, Timothy yelled that his catchment was working. He had taken more boards from the top of the raft and had made a large enough trough that would catch the rain. He'd picked up bamboo lengths on the beach and had fitted them together into a short pipe to funnel the rainwater into our 10-gallon keg. So, I myself have never been to the tropics or anything like that, so I've never gotten a chance to test any of this, if it would technically work or it's just complete fiction from the author. But some really interesting stuff here, very innovative. They remove nails from their raft and they pound them to twist them, and they use them as hooks. Stuff like that. They're eating lobsters, and them being out in the island, of course, they got to watch out for hurricanes and poisonous fish with barbs in the reef. Stuff like that. So if you're in the mood for something a little bit more tropical, this is going to be great. And then once again, this one has just a little bit more in terms of things to digest, the differences in classes and racism to a degree. It's not preachy, but it's done well, how people from different worlds are forced to live together, and at the end they become friends. And I still vividly recall the last page of this book when I was in 6th grade. You finish reading that last sentence, and my God, you're just tearing up. It's bittersweet, truthfully, and to this day, it just ends so powerful. Outstanding book, The K. So book number 3 is going to be The Revenant by Michael Punk. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this book because I've already have a full Junkyard Fox book review on this book that I made about 4 years ago. I'll have it up here in the corner if you want to check it out with more detailed thoughts and stuff. That video tanked. Didn't do that well, but I'm very proud of it. So, once again, The Revenant. You guys know that this is a famous movie that came out a couple years back with Leonardo DiCaprio starring, and it's just an outstanding cinematic masterpiece. I mean, the cinematography, the music, the acting, it's such a well-done movie. However, as much as I enjoy the movie, it's very much dramatic, it's very much fictional, where this one is far more down to the ground, very much more realistic. Not everything is realistic. Of course, there's some stuff has to be embellished in order to make a more interesting story because we don't have full details on all the characters, but it's just a little bit more realistic. For example, in the movie, Hugh Glass is Leonardo DiCaprio. He gets mauled by a bear, and he had his son there, and that his son is killed by Tom Hardy's character Fitzgerald. And in this book, Hugh Glass doesn't even have a son, so there's that much of a difference. But this one's a little bit longer. It's a longer journey. You follow him throughout the months, throughout the changing seasons. You get to meet a lot more characters here, and as such, you get to know them a little bit, know their backstory, where they came from, and then it's a little bit more tragic when things do happen to them. So if you're in the mood for something a little bit more American during the fur trade era, and you got to look out for in the wilderness for grizzlies and wolves, but at the same time also, Native American tribes that could kill you, scalp you, that kind of stuff. This is a great book. As always, you guys know I'm such a foodie, especially when it comes to wild food, that I generally always underline like a delicious sounding meal. So here's an excerpt that I really like. In this one, he scavenged a calf that wolves had killed. And so it says, he built racks from the green branches of a nearby stand of willows. Hour after hour, he carved away at the carcass with the dull razor, hanging meat on the racks while he steadily fed the fires. In 3 days, he dried 15 pounds of jerky, enough to sustain him for 2 weeks if need be, longer if he could supplement along the way. The wolves did leave one choice cut, the tongue. He relished this delicacy like a king. The ribs and remaining leg bones he roasted on the fire one by one, cracking them for the rich, fresh marrow. Really outstanding book in the American West, and the winter, there's snow, there's blizzards, so it's definitely a different setting than, say, The Cave, for example. So The Revenant by Michael Punk, check it out. Really awesome 1823 fur trade era action. Book number 4 is going to be No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy, and Cormac McCarthy is my favorite novelist of all time. I'm obsessed with him. He does some fantastic work. I don't think everything he's made is great or speaks to me, but majority, when he does something good, it's outstanding. I'm obsessed with the guy. And No Country for Old Men, not only is it a book, but a few years later it was adapted as a film directed by the Coen brothers, and that is my favorite movie of all time. I'm obsessed with that movie. There's deep themes of human nature and savagery and the changing of times, and just great stuff. And it's going to sound blasphemous here, but it's one of the moments where I actually consider the movie superior to the book. And the book's no slouch. It's just what they were able to bring upon for the movie, and how to make the characters, their outfits and their mannerisms. It just makes them leap off the page far more than the book does. For those of you who don't know, No Country for Old Men, it takes place in the year 1980, so it's kind of modern. It's considered a neo-Western. There's definitely themes of, the outlaw and the lawman and that kind of stuff. Think of it as a very modern-day nihilistic, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so, a brief plot synopsis is that there's this hunter, Llewellyn Moss. He's a good old boy from Texas, and he's out in the desert hunting, and he accidentally runs across this massacre, this drug deal gone bad with the cartel and American buyers. And there's all these bodies dead, and he finds a briefcase with $2 million. And he decides no one's around, he decides to grab that briefcase and make a run for it, have a good life for him and his girl. But of course, there are no clean getaways. Somebody sends this psychopath, Anton Chigurh, to go after him to retrieve that money. And Anton Chigurh is one of the most frightening and unsettling characters in book and movie history. And yet at the same time, there's something charismatic about this psychopath. And what I like about this book is it really taught me in terms of how to think outside the box. It's easy to read an instruction or be taught by a survival instructor or your military instructor on how to go about doing this, how to do that, and the right tool for the job. But a lot of times you're not going to have those tools, or you're not going to have someone telling you what to do. So you have to improvise and, just learn to be resourceful. And this book really opened my eyes to that. So, for example, if they need to open the vents on an air duct and they don't have a screwdriver, they don't have a Swiss Army knife, they'll just reach in their pocket, get a coin, and use that. And I think it's like clever stuff like that. And this book really taught me that. And these characters are extremely intelligent. Another great example is Llewellyn Moss, the main character that's on the run, and how clever he is on adapting to the situation. He opens the air ducts and he places the money in there, the briefcase, and he pushes it down so it's on to the edge of another room. Then later on he wants to rent the other room to retrieve that briefcase. And so what he does to push that down the air duct, it says here, he cuts a length from the Venetian blind cord at the window and tied the end of the cord to the case. He got the clothes pull out of the closet, sliding the wire hangers off the floor, and stood on the dresser again and pushed the case down the duct as far as he could reach. And then the next day, of course, he's in the other room, and now he needs to reach this briefcase that's kind of 13 feet away from him through the air ducts. And it says, he untied the little nylon bag, slid the tent poles out. They were lightweight aluminum tubes 3 feet long, and he assembled 3 of them and taped the joints with duct tape so that they wouldn't pull apart. He went to the closet and came back with 3 wire hangers and sat on the bed and cut the hooks off with the side cutters and wrapped them into one hook with the tape. Then he taped them to the end of the pole, stood up, and slid the pole down to the ductwork. And that's how he retrieves his money. So, really great book. It's a cat and mouse game. It's just outstanding stuff. But this is a book that really opened my eyes to something's in the way from you and your objective. You figure things out with just whatever's around you. So, No Country for Old Men by Cormac McCarthy. And lastly, book number 5 is going to be Into the Wild by Jan Krakauer. Once again, just like No Country for Old Men, just like The Revenant, Into the Wild is a movie, a fantastic movie, once again, that I think everyone that's into wilderness and camping and self-reliance should watch at least once. Now, the main character, Christopher McCandless, he was a real person. This is real. This is nonfiction. And so that's because of that, it's going to be very polarizing on how you view him as a person. Some people can view him as this romantic figure, this real-life Huckleberry Finn. He came from rich people. He graduated college, and then he threw all that money away. He threw a secure future away so he can wander the wilderness and make experiences, and then years later he died. They found his body dead in Alaska. Some people can view him as, he at least lived to fulfill his dreams and see the world and experience it on his terms, as opposed to someone who is never late to his 9 to 5 and makes it to 100. But what's the point of being 100 if you never got to live your life? So some people can see him as a romantic figure. Other people see him as this arrogant rich kid who didn't take warnings from people, and they found his body in Alaska because of his arrogance and his naivete. So I'm in the middle. I can see both sides to this day. I would be a liar if I wouldn't tell you that this book changed my life. This book is what got me into wilderness. Like, I had a fascination already from playing games like Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater, but once I got this book, and I got it for $1.99 at a thrift store, it changed my life. It was outstanding, and seeing someone go from, hey, I would like to do this, to I'm doing it, made me want to go, hey, I wish I knew how to do wilderness stuff, but no one does it nearby, boo-hoo, to no, I'm going to go out there, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to experience the good and the bad. And this is a book that really changed my life in that direction. So it's nonfiction. Parts of it are from his journals. Parts of them are letters he sent to friends, interviews from people like his family, his co-workers as he was traveling. Outstanding book. Once again, the movie is also outstanding too, directed by Sean Penn. And it ends tragically, of course. They did find his body. He did end up becoming sick and alone. And, it is tragic. But once again, I also think for those few years that he lived his life on his own terms, that's something that 99% of us cannot even say that we've done. So, it's up to you. And here's a little bit of an excerpt. Now, this is a letter he sent to a friend of his while he was traveling, and I think it's just so incredibly beautiful. Is there some naive to this? Of course, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't lack a lot of substance and a lot of beauty to it. So it says, I'd like to repeat the advice I gave you before, in that I think you really should make a radical change in your lifestyle and begin to boldly do things which you may previously never have thought of doing or been too hesitant to attempt. So many people live within unhappy circumstances and yet will not take the initiative to change their situation because they are conditioned to a life of security, conformity, and conservatism, all of which may appear to give one peace of mind, but in reality is nothing more damaging to the adventurous spirit within a man than a secure future. The very basic core of a man's living spirit is his passion for adventure. The joy of life comes from our encounters with new experiences, and hence there is no greater joy than to have an endless changing horizon, for each day to have a new and different sun. If you want to get more out of life, Ron, you must lose your inclination for monotonous security and adopt a helter-skelter style of life that will at first appear to you to be crazy, but once you become accustomed to such a life, you will see its full meaning and its incredible beauty. Outstanding stuff, beautiful stuff. And great, great book. It's not one of those things where they're, correlated like the book and the movie. The events of the movie do happen here, but there's just a lot more here when it comes to like investigating the death of someone and scientific studies and stuff like that. So Into the Wild, once again, an outstanding book that I highly recommend. Obviously this one's thicker. There's a lot more research and stuff. So it's a more complex book to digest, and there's a lot more to think about where you stand on his views of the world, Alexander Supertramp. But I gotta say, just a life-changing book for me. Someone I look up to in many ways. Of course, I hope to learn from his mistakes and be a little smarter and live a little longer, but at the same time, you can't deny his adventurous spirit. So, Into the Wild. Well, that's about it, folks. I know this is something off the beaten path from what we normally do, but I happen to be a big book fanatic, so this is something I'm just very passionate about. And if this is not your cup of tea, just wait a couple of days to when I can finally get out and do some camping, camp cooking, all that good stuff. But these are my 5 book suggestions if you're looking to read a couple of survival storybooks. I have a lot more, but I wanted to keep it simple with just 5 as opposed to 10 of them, and making this video overly long. So if you want to read something, something easy, so when you're reading your lunch break during work, or if you're like me and you like to read like an hour before bedtime, something very simple is Hatchet. Very enjoyable, easy to digest book. If you're looking for something a little bit more complex, a little bit more with depth, of course we have the more controversial Into the Wild by Jan Krakauer, the story of Alexander Supertramp. And then, of course, if you've watched these movies but you want to check them out, read the book so you can read the differences like The Revenant and No Country for Old Men. Check these out as well. And then, of course, one of my favorites is The K, because I'm a sucker more for like a tropical survival and beaches and cooking up a lobster. I really gravitate a lot more to that because I've never done it, so it just sounds so fun, So these are the ones for me. Let's get a conversation going. So if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give us a thumbs up and comment down below. If you've read these, which one is your favorite and why? How did it change your mindset? What did you learn from it? A favorite passage from it? Let us know. And I know there's going to be a lot more books that I didn't mention here, like Lord of the Flies by William Golding. That's also a survival story book. I didn't include this one because I haven't read that one since high school. I own it. So I am currently rereading it so I can kind of be refreshed with the details of the plot and all that stuff. And that's about it for me, folks. So the sun is setting. Once again, I know this is off the beaten path, but if you enjoyed this, once again, give us a thumbs up. Let's get a conversation going down below. And if you're inclined to purchase one of these, I highly suggest go to your local thrift store. You can find these for $1.99, just $5, something like that. You don't have to buy them for a brand new. And in case you want a brand new one or something with the more modern, updated cover, I'll have the links down below to my Amazon store where you can purchase these. Throws a couple cents our way so we can put a couple bucks in the gas tank and get out here and film more adventures. With that being said, I'll see you guys next week with another video. Now go outside and get your boots dirty.